The question. The desert world was silent after the battle except for the faint crackle of fires burning in the wreckage. Evan lay on the ground with his wrists tied by glowing alien restraints. Dust stuck to his face, and every breath felt heavy. He had fought until his rifle was empty, until his strength was gone, and now he was only one human among the ruins of his squad. Above him stood tall figures in black armor, their helmets shaped like sharp blades. They did not speak his language, but their gestures were clear. He was a prisoner now. They dragged him across the sand, through corridors of a fortress built from metal and stone. Each hallway echoed with the sound of boots, and with each step Evan felt more like he was walking deeper into the mouth of a beast. Finally, they pushed him into a chamber lit with pale, blue light. The walls shimmered with alien symbols that seemed to move like water. At the center stood a single figure, taller than the rest. Her armor was darker, heavier, the surface etched with scars of countless battles. Her helmet turned toward him slowly, and even without seeing her face, Evan felt her eyes burning through the steel. This was their commander. Her name, whispered by the guards, was Zira. She was known as a ruthless conqueror, a warrior who never showed weakness. But now she was staring at him, silent, as if studying a puzzle she did not understand. The guards shoved Evan down to his knees in front of her. He clenched his jaw, refusing to show fear. For a long moment nothing was said. The only sound was the soft hum of machines in the walls. Finally, Zyra's voice filled the chamber, cold and sharp. It was the kind of voice that could cut stone. Through a translator device, her words reached Evan's ears. "Human, what do you want?" Evan blinked, surprised. He had expected threats, maybe torture, not a question so simple. But he also saw the trap. If he begged for life, she would see him as weak. If he asked for freedom, she would laugh. If he stayed silent, they might break him anyway. He was tired, his body beaten, his spirit heavy. And yet, in that moment, something reckless stirred inside him, a strange spark of defiance mixed with humor. He lifted his chin, met the glowing eyes of her helmet, and said with a half-smile, "You." The word echoed in the chamber. The guards froze, their armored hands tightening on their weapons. Even the translator machine seemed to hesitate, replaying his answer as if unsure. Zira did not move, but the silence that followed was heavier than iron. She had expected fear, begging, curses, anything but this. A human prisoner, bruised and broken, daring to say he wanted her. For the first time in years, Zira felt her breath catch, hidden behind her helmet. Why did that single word strike deeper than a blade? Evan held her gaze, or what he imagined was her gaze behind the mask. Inside, his heart raced. His mind screamed at him for speaking such a thing. But on the surface, he stayed calm. He would not give her the satisfaction of seeing him afraid. Finally, Zyra took a step closer, the floor trembling under her armored boots. The guards exchanged nervous looks but said nothing. She stopped only a foot away from him. The blue light reflected off her armor, making her look like a shadow carved from steel. She leaned down, her voice lower, almost a whisper. "You want me?" Evan swallowed but did not break eye contact. "You asked what I wanted." I answered. For the first time, Zira could not find her words. Something cracked inside her, a hairline fracture in the wall she had built around herself. Her fingers twitched at the side of her helmet. For a heartbeat, she thought about unlocking it, showing her true face, but the weight of tradition, of her soldiers watching, kept her still. She straightened again, hiding the storm in her chest. "Take him away," she ordered sharply. Her voice sounded steady, but the guards noticed the faint delay, the smallest tremor. They obeyed, dragging Evan back toward the cells as he was pulled away. Evan allowed himself the smallest grin. He had no idea why he said it, no plan. But he knew he had struck something inside her. Something dangerous. Something fragile. And as Zira stood alone in the chamber, staring at the spot where he had knelt, the single word "you" replayed in her mind again and again. Like a crack that refused to close, the fires of war still burned outside. But in that quiet chamber, a different kind of fire had begun. one that neither of them understood yet, and one that would change everything. Cracks in the mask. The fortress of stone and steel was quiet that night, but inside her private chamber, Commander Zira could not rest. She sat on a tall chair made of black metal, her helmet still locked on. Her eyes stared at the glowing wall symbols, yet her mind was somewhere else. The human's words would not leave her. She had faced warlords, rebels, assassins. None had ever said such a thing. Humans were supposed to be desperate creatures, begging for life. But this one, he had looked straight at her and dared to want her. Zira's hand moved slowly to her chest plate. Her fingers brushed the release lock. For a moment she almost pressed it, almost freed herself from the heavy mask. But then her training echoed in her head. Never show your face to the weak. Armor is honor. Armor is strength. She stopped, clenching her fist until her claws dug into her palm. Her guards had noticed something. She could see it in their eyes. They had heard his words too. If she let this weakness show, the whispers would spread like fire. And yet, when she closed her eyes, she saw his expression. Calm, fearless, mocking fate itself. The next morning, Zira stood in the training yard. She swung her blade through the air, sparks flying with every strike. Her soldiers watched from the edges, whispering. She was faster, sharper, angrier than ever. Every strike was a way to crush the thought that haunted her. But no matter how hard she struck, the word returned. You. She dismissed the soldiers with a sharp order and went back inside. Her second-in-command, a tall alien named Varric, stopped her at the doorway. "Commander, is it true the human defied you?" he asked carefully. Zira's helmet turned toward him, her voice steady but cold. "He is nothing. Do not waste your breath on him." Varric nodded, though his eyes lingered with doubt. Already the rumor had begun. Later, Zira entered the holding cells. Evan sat against the wall, his wrists still bound by glowing restraints. His lips were dry, his face pale, but his eyes still carried the same spark. He looked up as she entered. "Back for more questions?" he asked, his voice rough but steady. Zira stood in silence for a long moment. The guards shifted nervously at her side, unsure why she hesitated. Finally, she dismissed them with a wave of her hand. The heavy door sealed behind her, leaving only the two of them in the dim light. She stepped closer, her boots echoing on the stone floor. "Why did you say that?" she asked, her voice low. Evan tilted his head, pretending not to understand. "Say what?" Her voice sharpened. "You told me what you wanted. You said me. Why?" Evan gave a half smile, tired but unbroken. "Because it was true. You asked. I answered." His words carried no fear, only honesty. It struck her again like a blade sliding past armor. For a second, Zira almost reached up to unlock her helmet, almost let him see what no human had ever seen. Instead, she stepped back, her fists trembling. Inside the gauntlets, "You play a dangerous game, human," she warned. But her voice lacked its usual sharpness. It almost sounded uncertain. Evan leaned against the wall, eyes fixed on her. "Or maybe you're the one who doesn't know the rules anymore." The words hung in the air. Zira turned sharply and stormed out. The heavy door slammed shut behind her. But even as she walked down the hall, she realized her heart was racing. A human prisoner, changing the way she felt. It was impossible, yet the crack in her mask was growing. That night, Zira stood alone on the balcony of the fortress. The desert winds howled, carrying the ashes of war. Her people looked at her as unbreakable, untouchable. But for the first time, she wondered if the armor she wore was not her strength, but her prison. The stars above shimmered, and somewhere in the cells below, a human still waited. A human who had dared to want her, and Zira, the unshakable commander, could not deny it any longer. The thought both terrified and thrilled her. The cracks in the mask had begun, the first unraveling. The fortress was alive with drills and patrols. Soldiers moved in tight formation, their boots striking the floor in rhythm. Weapons gleamed under the pale sun, and the banners of Zira's people hung heavy in the dry wind. To the outside world, it looked like strength, like order, like control. But inside Zira's private chamber, control was slipping. She sat alone, her armor still on, her helmet resting on the table. Her face was hidden from her people, but now it was bare in the silence. Her eyes traced the scars across her cheek, scars she had never shown to anyone. They were proof of battles survived, but also chains that reminded her of who she had to be. Evan's voice replayed in her mind again and again. You. It wasn't just the word, it was the way he said it. Not with fear. Not with mocking arrogance, but with something else. Something that felt dangerously close to truth. That night, Zira stood before a mirror of polished steel. Her hands gripped the edge of the sink as she leaned forward. The warrior in the reflection looked strong, fierce, untouchable. But behind her eyes, doubt flickered like firelight. She remembered her youth. The day she had first put on the armor of her people, the elders had told her, "Armor is honor. Armor is self. Without it, you are nothing." She had believed it for so long. But now, one human's words were making her question everything. Her fingers brushed the release lock on her chest plate. Slowly, with a hiss of air, the first piece of armor loosened. The weight slipped from her shoulders. She closed her eyes, feeling lighter, more exposed. Piece by piece, she removed the armor, until only the underlayer remained. For a brief moment, she felt free. Her skin touched the cold air of the room. Her heart beat faster, not from fear of battle, but from something unfamiliar. But just as quickly, her hand snapped back and resealed the chest plate. The sound of armor locking echoed like a prison door slamming shut. Meanwhile, Evan sat in his cell. The glow of the restraints dimmed slightly as he shifted. He had counted the hours, watched. The guards studied the routine. Escape was not impossible, but risky. Yet something in him said he should wait. Because Zira, the commander, was not like the others. Something about her reaction told him that the walls around her were breaking. When Zira entered his cell again the next day, she wore her armor, perfect and unbroken. But Evan noticed the smallest hesitation in her stride, the smallest pause before she spoke. "Human," she said, her voice steady but not as sharp as before. "Your kind believes in connection, do you not? Bonds, loyalty, emotions. Do you think those are strength?" Evan looked at her calmly. "I don't think. I know." He leaned forward, his eyes steady on her masked face. "And I think you know it too. That's why you keep coming back." Her fists clenched at her sides. No one had ever spoken to her like this. Not her soldiers, not her rivals, not even her council. Evan was a prisoner, yet somehow, he spoke as if he could see through the armor she wore. She turned, sharply, and left, her boots striking the floor like thunder. But even as she walked away, his words burned in her chest. She hated that he was right. She hated that she wanted to hear more. Later that night, Zira stood on the fortress balcony again. The desert stretched endlessly, the horizon glowing under 2 moons. She removed her helmet slowly and let the cold air touch her face. The stars above seemed brighter without the visor's filter. For a moment, she felt small. Not a commander, not a warrior, but simply a being looking at the sky. Why? Do his words matter? She whispered to herself. Why do I care? But deep inside she knew the truth. Because no one had ever dared to want her. Not the armor, not the commander, not the symbol. But her, the one hidden beneath all of it. And as the wind rushed past, carrying the sound of distant war drums, she realized the crack in her mask was no longer just a crack. It was spreading, and if she wasn't careful, it would break wide open. The fortress slept, but Zira did not. And in the quiet of her chamber, with her armor half unlocked, she whispered the word that haunted her. You. Her own voice trembled, and she knew nothing would ever be the same again. The armor falls. The morning air inside the fortress was colder than usual. A storm had swept across the desert in the night, shaking the walls and filling the sky with dust. The soldiers in the courtyard moved with unease, whispering about the human prisoner and their commander. Rumors spread like wildfire. Why had the great Zira spent so much time with a weak human? None dared to ask her directly, but their eyes followed her wherever she went. Inside the holding chamber, Evan sat against the wall, his wrists still locked by glowing restraints. The guards had been colder with him lately, their movements sharper, their silence louder. He could feel the tension in the air. Something was about to happen, he just didn't know what. The heavy door hissed open. Zira stepped in, her black armor gleaming under the pale blue light. She dismissed the guards with a sharp hand signal. They hesitated for a moment, then obeyed, the door sliding shut behind them. Now it was only the two of them again, prisoner and commander. For a long time, Zira stood in silence. Evan watched her carefully. Her hands were not as steady as before. Her breath echoed inside the helmet, shallow and uneven. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and rough and human. "Do you even understand the danger of what you said to me?" Evan tilted his head, tired but calm. "I understand enough." Her fists clenched at her sides. "You made me question myself. That is not allowed. I am a commander. My armor is my life. Without it, I am nothing." Evan leaned forward slowly, his eyes never leaving her. "Maybe without it, you'd finally be something real." The word struck like lightning. Her heart pounded against the armor that had always been her shield. She took one step forward, then another, until she was standing directly above him. Her hand hovered near the release lock, trembling. For a moment, she froze. Her entire life screamed at her to stop. But then she pressed it. Hiss! The chest plate loosened with a sharp click. The heavy armor piece dropped to the ground with a metallic crash. Dust rose in the air as more locks disengaged. One by one, the plates fell. Shoulders, gauntlets, leg guards. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. Evan stared, his eyes widening, but he stayed silent. He knew this was more than just a physical act. It was rebellion. It was confession. It was everything. Finally, Zira reached for her helmet. Her claws pressed the last seal. With a hiss of air, the helmet lifted, and for the first time, her face was bare before a human. Her skin was pale gray with faint glowing marks that traced down her jawline. A long scar cut across her cheek, sharp and brutal. But her eyes burned with a strange light, fierce and yet vulnerable. She looked nothing like the untouchable commander her soldiers worshipped. She looked real. Evan's lips parted, but no words came out at first. He had expected rage, cruelty, maybe alien coldness. But instead he saw someone who was tired of pretending. Finally he whispered, "Now, I see you." Her breath caught. No one had ever said those words to her. Not as Zira the warrior, not as the masked commander, but as her. She felt a strange pull in her chest, something she couldn't name. For a long moment, they only stared at each other. The silence was louder than any battle. Then from outside, footsteps echoed. The guards had heard the crash of armor and were rushing back. Zira's eyes widened. If they saw her like this, her life, her command, her honor, all of it would be destroyed. But she did not move. She stood tall, her armor scattered on the floor, her face revealed. And when the door burst open, the guards froze in shock, their commander unmasked. Their commander, vulnerable. Their commander, looking at a human like no one else mattered. The room was heavy with silence. The guards did not dare speak. Evan watched it unfold, his heart pounding. The balance of power had shifted in a single instant. Zira straightened, her scarred face hardening with resolve. "Leave us," she ordered, her voice sharp but bare without the helmet's filter. The guards hesitated, then bowed their heads and left quickly. The door sealed again. She turned back to Evan, her chest rising and falling fast. "You see what you have done?" she whispered. "You have broken something that cannot be repaired." Evan met her eyes calm but steady. Or maybe I've set something free. Her lips trembled at his words. She had no answer, no defense. For the first time in her life, Zira felt more exposed than she had in any battle, and yet, in that terrifying exposure, she felt alive. The armor had fallen, and nothing would ever be the same again. Dangerous choice. The sound of her armor hitting the floor had not stopped echoing through the fortress. Even though the guards had obeyed her order and left the chamber, their silence told her everything. The rumor would spread, faster than any fire. Zira had broken the one rule no warrior of her people ever dared break. She had revealed herself not to another commander, not to the council, but to a human. By the time she walked back into the war hall later that day, whispers filled the air. Dozens of eyes followed her. She walked in full armor again, helmet, sealed tight, but her soldiers could not unsee what they had seen. Behind their salute, their loyalty had already begun to shift into doubt. At the far end of the hall, her second-in-command Varak waited. His voice was low but sharp when he spoke. "Commander, the council has heard. They are demanding answers." Zira's heart tightened. In her chest, the council, her people's highest power, did not forgive weakness. If they decided she had broken her honor, she could be stripped of her rank. Or worse, she gave a curt nod, hiding her unease. "Tell them I will answer, alone." That night, the council's voice came through the fortress communicator, the chamber filled with the glow of their holograms. Tall figures in ceremonial armor, masks covering every face. Their voices overlapped, deep and unyielding. "Zira of the 9th Legion," the head counselor began. "Reports reach us that you exposed yourself before a human prisoner. Do you deny this?" The silence stretched. Her soldiers would expect denial, excuses, but Zira knew the truth was already out. Her hand clenched into a fist at her side. "I do not deny it." The hologram stirred with angry whispers. One voice rose above the rest. "Then you have broken the code. You have shamed the armor. The human must be executed at once, and your command will be reviewed." Her chest tightened at the words. Evan executed. She forced her voice to remain steady. "The human is not weak. He has value. His strength is different from ours, but real." The chamber erupted with outrage. "You defend him? Over your own kind? You betray us, Zira?" The holograms blinked out, their judgment already clear. The human would be killed, and her own trial was close. Zira stood in the silent chamber, her breath heavy behind the helmet. She wanted to crush the walls, to silence the voices that demanded obedience, but she could not. This was bigger than her. She had taken a step that could not be undone. She left the council chamber and walked toward the cells. The guards straightened as she approached, but their eyes betrayed hesitation. She waved them off and entered alone. Inside, Evan sat calmly against the wall. He looked up as she entered. "I'm guessing that look means things didn't go well," he said quietly. Even chained, he carried the same strange calm. Zira's fists tightened at her sides. "The council demands your death, and they will strip me of command for protecting you." Evan raised an eyebrow. "And what do you want?" The question hit her harder than the council's judgment. For so long she had lived by orders, by rules, by duty. No one had ever asked what she wanted, not until him. Her lips trembled beneath the helmet. I don't know." Evan leaned forward, his eyes steady. "Yes, you do. You wouldn't be here if you didn't." Her heart pounded in her chest. Every instinct screamed to leave, to hide behind the armor again. But something deeper pulled her closer instead. The next day the fortress was restless. Soldiers trained harder, voices sharper. The air felt heavy with storm. Varak approached Zira with a cold look. "The human is scheduled for execution at dawn. The council will send witnesses. If you interfere, you will be declared a traitor." Zira's chest burned. Her soldiers were watching, the council was watching. But when she closed her eyes, all she saw was Evan's calm expression. "You already know what you want." His words echoed in her head, and for the first time in her life, Zira realized it was true. When night fell, she stood outside the cell. The guards had been rotated, their eyes dull from long shifts. With a single command, she dismissed them. The heavy door slid open. Evan looked up at her, his voice, quiet but steady. "You've made your choice, haven't you?" Zyra stepped inside, her helmet still on, but her hands shook as she reached for the locks. One by one, she disabled the restraints around his wrists. The glowing chains fell with a faint spark. Evan flexed his hands, rubbing the sore skin. "That's dangerous," he said softly. She met his eyes through the visor. Everything worth doing is dangerous. At that moment, alarms blared across the fortress. Her betrayal had already been discovered. Heavy footsteps thundered in the hall. The execution had begun early. And now, the hunter had become the hunted. Fire and betrayal. The alarms howled through the fortress like the cries of angry beasts. Red lights pulsed across the metal walls, throwing shadows that danced like fire. Evan's heart raced as he looked at Zyra. Her armor glinted under the warning lights, but her visor reflected something deeper, fear mixed with resolve. Outside the cell, heavy footsteps thundered closer. Dozens of soldiers were gathering, weapons primed. The council had acted faster than Zyra expected. They had known she might break, and now they wanted to catch her in the act. "We have to move," she snapped, grabbing Evan's arm. Her strength pulled him to his feet, his body still weak from days in chains. But there was no time to rest. Survival demanded action. The door burst open, and Varric stood in the hall, flanked by armed guards. His eyes burned with betrayal, his voice a sharp blade. "I warned you, Commander. You've chosen a human over your people. Now you'll share his fate." Zyra's jaw tightened behind the helmet. "Stand down, Varric. You don't understand." But Varric's laughter was bitter. "No, I understand too well. You've grown weak. The council saw it before I did. Now I'll finish what you couldn't." He raised his weapon, a blade crackling with energy. Evan tensed, but Zyra moved first. Her own sword ignited with a surge of light, clashing against Varric's with a thunderous crack. Sparks rained across the hall as the two warriors locked in a furious duel. Evan staggered back, his wrists sore but free. Two guards rushed him, assuming he was helpless. But even without a weapon, Evan fought like a man with nothing to lose. He ducked under the first strike, grabbing the soldier's arm and twisting, hard until the alien roared in pain. He kicked the second square in the chest, sending him crashing against the wall. The restraints had weakened his body but not his spirit. Zyra and Varric's duel shook the corridor. Blades clashed, armor sparked, each strike carrying years of training and fury. "You shame our people!" Varric roared, pressing forward with a brutal slash. Zyra deflected, her voice steady even as her arms shook. "No, I am saving us from ourselves." Their blades locked, faces inches apart. For the first time, Varric saw doubt in her eyes, not weakness, but something stronger than loyalty. And it terrified him. The hall filled with more soldiers, weapons raised. Zyra spun, knocking Varric back. She grabbed Evan's arm and pulled him into a side passage. "We can't fight them all. This way!" They ran through the fortress corridors, alarms screaming, soldiers shouting. Evan stumbled, but Zyra kept him upright, her strength dragging him forward. They turned corner after corner, until they reached the hangar. Inside, dozens of alien ships stood ready, their engines humming, but the hangar was crawling with guards. They had been waiting, expecting her betrayal. "They knew," Evan muttered, his chest heaving. Zyra's eyes narrowed behind her visor. "Varric planned this. He wanted me to fall. He wanted command for himself." Before Evan could answer, Varric's voice boomed through the loudspeakers. "Commander Zyra is no longer fit to lead. By order of the council, she is condemned. The human will die with her. All units, attack." The soldiers surged forward like a wave. Zyra ignited her blade again, her body moving faster than thought. Every strike was precise, cutting down those who blocked their path. But there were too many, hundreds, maybe more. Blaster fire lit. The air, sparks, and smoke filled the hangar. Evan dove behind a crate, grabbing a fallen guard's weapon. He aimed and fired, the recoil jolting through his arms. The energy blast struck true, dropping a soldier. For the first time, he felt the fight was his too, not just hers. But the battle was slipping away. Zyra was strong but not invincible. Her armor took blows, sparks flying as cracks spread across the plating. Evan rushed to her side, firing at anyone who got too close. "We can't hold them off forever," he shouted. Zira slashed through another wave, her chest heaving. "Then we don't. We take one ship and escape." Her eyes locked onto a small interceptor at the far end of the hangar. Sleek, fast, built for speed rather than war. But it was heavily guarded. Evan's throat tightened. "We'll never reach it." Zara's voice cut through the chaos. "We don't have to. We fight until we do." Together they charged, blades and blasts cutting a path through the sea of soldiers. Evan's lungs burned, his arms ached, but he pushed forward. Zira's strikes grew slower, her armor breaking, but still she fought. They were so close, the ship was only steps away. And then Varric appeared again, his blade dripping with sparks. He blocked their path, eyes burning with fury. "You won't leave alive," he growled. The soldiers closed in behind him, sealing every exit. The hangar shook with the weight of betrayal and fire. Evan raised his weapon, Zira raised her blade, surrounded, outnumbered, trapped. But neither was ready to fall. The unbreakable bond. The hangar roared with chaos. Blaster fire lit the air. Like lightning, sparks rained down from the ceiling. Hundreds of soldiers pressed in from every side, their weapons aimed, their shouts rising. And at the center stood Zira and Evan, outnumbered, cornered, but unbroken. Varric's blade crackled with energy as he stepped forward, his eyes locked on Zira, his voice sharp with triumph. "You've disgraced our people. You chose a human over your duty. Now you die." Zira's chest rose and fell heavily inside her broken armor, but her voice came steady, strong. "I did not betray my people. I betrayed the chains you call tradition." Evan raised his stolen rifle, his body trembling with exhaustion, but his grip steady. He glanced at Zira. "Looks like it's us against the galaxy." For the first time, Zira's lips curved in the faintest smile behind her visor. "Then let the galaxy remember us." Varric lunged, his blade swinging with fury. Zira blocked, the impact shaking the floor beneath them. The two commanders clashed again and again, their strikes so fast the air screamed around them. Evan fired at the soldiers pressing closer, every shot buying them seconds. But the numbers were endless. Zira's armor cracked under Varric's blows, sparks bursting from the joints. Her legs weakened, her arms ached, but she fought harder than ever before. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was choice, her choice. Not the Council's, not her people's. Varric shoved her back, his blade raised for a final strike. But Evan dove forward, tackling Zira out of the way. The energy blade slashed the ground where she had stood. Evan rolled to his feet, his rifle raised. Varric turned in shock. Just in time for Evan's blast to strike his shoulder, the commander staggered back, roaring in fury. "The ship!" Zira shouted, pointing to the interceptor at the edge of the hangar. They ran together, side by side, cutting through the chaos. Soldiers tried to block them, but Zira's blade tore through. Evan's shots cleared the path. Their breaths came, ragged, their bodies pushed beyond their limits, but the ship grew closer with every desperate step. Then as they reached the ramp, Varric's voice thundered behind them. "No!" He charged faster than they expected. Zira turned just as his blade struck. The energy slash tore through her side, cutting into her armor. She staggered, the pain blazing like fire through her body. Evan caught her before she fell, his eyes wide with fear. "Zira, stay with me." Her vision blurred, but she forced herself to stand. Her blade rose again, fueled by sheer will. With a cry that shook the hangar, she swung one final time. Her strike cut across Varric's chest, sparks exploding as he collapsed. To the ground, defeated. The soldiers hesitated, shocked by the fall of their second-in-command. Zira's voice, weak but sharp, cut through the silence. "Stand down, or follow him into the ground." Her authority, even wounded, was undeniable. The soldiers faltered, some lowering their weapons. Evan seized the moment, pulling Zira toward the ship. Together they stumbled up the ramp, sealing the hatch as blaster. Fire exploded behind them. Inside, alarm screamed as Evan rushed to the controls. He had no idea how to fly alien ships, but Zira's trembling hands guided him. Buttons lit, engines roared, and the interceptor shook as it prepared for launch. The hangar doors began to close. Council ships outside preparing to cut them down. "We're not going to make it," Evan muttered, sweat running down his face. Sarah placed her bloodied hand over his, her voice soft. "Trust me." With one last surge of power, the ship blasted forward. It shot through the narrowing doors just as they slammed shut. Enemy fire streaked across the sky, but the interceptor weaved between blasts. The desert world shrank behind them as stars filled the viewport. Evan glanced at Zira, his relief fading when he saw the blood seeping through her cracked armor. Her breaths came shallow, her strength fading fast. "Stay with me," he begged, his voice raw. She gave a faint smile, her scarred face softening. "When you said you wanted me, I thought it was a joke. But now, I believe you." Evan's throat tightened, his eyes burning. He gripped her hand firmly. "I meant it, and I won't let you go." Her eyelids fluttered, her voice a whisper. "Then prove it. Don't let them take me back." Evan nodded fiercely. "Never." He pushed the ship into hyperspace, the stars stretching into brilliant lines of light, the galaxy behind them blurred. But inside the cockpit, one truth burned brighter than any star. They were no longer prisoner and commander, no longer enemies. They were bound together, unbreakable, far away, in the silence of space. Evan held Zira's hand as she rested against him, her armor broken, her body wounded, but her spirit free. For the first time in her life, she wasn't hiding behind steel. And for the first time in his, Evan wasn't fighting alone. Whatever battles awaited them, whatever war the Council would bring, they would face it together, and the galaxy would remember the night when one word, you, broke an empire.